Hi, I made a video yesterday, uploaded it onto YouTube, and it was making a connection between the Clarion-Clipperton zone and what's been going on with Earth's magnetosphere, the flow of magma in the outer core of the Earth's core that is directly, that part that's directly under the Pacific Ocean. So scientists say a massive flow system inside Earth's core beneath the Pacific suddenly reversed direction around 2010. And, this is important because around 2010, as I show in my previous video, industrial scale exploration for polymetallic nodules in the Clarion-Clipperton zone accelerated significantly during the 2010s. Okay? And as it says in this article here, which is Science Alert, something made Earth's molten core reverse direction in 2010. Okay, so I'm just going to read this little section here. By studying changes in Earth's magnetic field, scientists previously determined that the molten outer core generally flows in a westward direction. Then in 2011, something unexpected happened. Scientists saw hints that the flow beneath the Pacific was moving eastward. Now, after examining 27 years of satellite data from 1997 to 2025, Madsen and his colleagues have pieced together a picture of what might be happening down there. Most of the outer core's motion is dominated by a circulation pattern called the eccentric planetary gyre, or perhaps it's gear. The researchers' analysis reveals that in 2010, in the region beneath the Pacific Ocean, part of the outer core abruptly departed from this pattern, shifting from a weak westward flow before 2010 to a strong eastward one after 2012. So it started changing slightly in 2010 till it picked up in momentum until it becomes a strong eastward flow. But meanwhile, the rest of the magma is still working on a westward flow. So the flow continued to strengthen until 2020. As of the most recent measurements, it appears to be weakening again. So we're in 2026 now. The phenomenon didn't appear to be a small eddy or localised disturbance, but accounted for around 5% of the outer core surface flow, nor was the signal consistent with the circumspheric zonal bands observed on fluid bodies such as Jupiter and Saturn. Rather, it seemed to have a large wave-like structure, as though a chunk of molten core material suddenly thought better of where it wanted to go, surging in the other direction. Okay, so this video explains this. It's only very short, this one. So this video explains exactly, what was going on. If I can get it to stop.
And something deep inside the Earth broke a pattern held for at least 9,000 years. A massive river of liquid iron 2,900 kilometers below the Pacific reversed direction. It had been drifting westward since before recorded history. Then it flipped, and it has not stopped. This is not a surface event. This is the molten outer core, the layer that generates Earth's magnetic field, the shield that makes the planet habitable. When that flow changes, the field changes. The Pacific field is now shifting faster than anywhere else on Earth. Here is what else changed simultaneously. The inner core shifted its seismic behavior around 2010. Earth's rotation lost a 6-year oscillation it had held for decades. 3 geomagnetic jerks struck the Pacific in 2017, 2020, and 2024. None of that was happening before 2010. Navigation systems have already been hit. The World Magnetic Model required an emergency update in 2019 because the Pacific field was moving too fast for the standard 5-year schedule. Nobody knows what triggered this. A deep core event in 2010 is the leading hypothesis. Since 2020, the flow has been weakening, but in 2025 it is still running far stronger than anything recorded before the flip. If you want to read more about this, then go to our website abovethenormnews.com.
So there you have it, the explanation of what happened from 2010 onwards. And by 2020, it had started to fix itself. But then suddenly, by 2026, it started to reverse again, moving eastwards instead of westwards. Now, yes, I did connect it to, oh gosh, I don't know why this keeps happening. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to pause for a moment because the link's gone. Here we go. I have it back up. So, you know, as it says here, excuse me, I'm still got my hay fever stuff. Mining exploration and interest grew significantly in the Clarion-Clipperton zone during the 2010s, leading to major concerns over direct habitat destruction and seafloor and animal population. So animal population drops, heavy mining machinery trials directly on the abyssal plains caused a 37% reduction in the number of macrofaunal animals such as worms, crustaceans and mollusks in the tracks. Species diversity loss, direct physical disruption leads to a 32% reduction in species richness, severely harming fragile ecosystems that take decades or centuries to recover. Now, bearing in mind that 90% of the life at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean has not yet been identified, okay? In fact, scientists were amazed to find any life at all because it's such extreme pressure down there, and it's there's no sunlight gets through and very little oxygen, you see. So before 2010, there was I mean, the field was discovered, like I said in my previous video, in the 1950s, and throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, various government agencies under the watchful eye of the United Nations Seabed Authority, and so they were just doing explorations and investigations of that region. And then in 2010, the corporations were literally queuing up for licenses to do exploration of the seabed, environmental impacts of deep sea mining. And so, you know, they discovered a field, an area that if I can find the video here. It's up here somewhere. Here it is, the AI zone. So they discovered that in this area, when they sent this AI drone to the ocean floor, they found a field full of these nodules that are a combination, you know, they are metallic nodules that contain cobalt, iron, nickel, copper, manganese. Okay, and so yeah, in heavy industry, these are the metals that they want, and they're all just lying there on the sea floor. I don't know what is going on with this thing. Oxygen. This doesn't seem to want to play. So what they discovered is that that these rocks placed together do generate an electrical current, which in turn releases minerals and oxygen from these metallic nodules. And so I'm just going to play you this little bit. I mean, this part is, I've held it here because it is important, because, you know, we've got the nodule spark from the electrical field that runs between these nodules. And then you've got the gyre pull, or the Gaia pull. That's the Earth's own magnetic field underneath the ocean. You've got the descent of oxygen from the top, and you've got the deep layer sediment then, and all of it together supports life in that region. So I'm just going to play you from here so you can get an understanding of, what is exactly is going on with these nodules.
Ocean circulation. Deep sea organisms rely on that oxygen diffusing down from above. The deep ocean is essentially living off the scraps of surface productivity. That is why life gets sparser as you descend. Less oxygen, less food, less energy. But if nodules are producing oxygen
Sorry about
locally, that changes everything. Deep sea ecosystems might not be as oxygen limited as we thought. Species distributions might be determined by nodule density, not just depth and pressure. Evolution in the abyss might have been shaped by localized oxygen production that we never knew existed. And if we remove the nodules, if mining operations vacuum up billions of tons of these rocks, we might be eliminating the oxygen source that deep sea life depends on. The discovery by the AI drone raised questions faster than the research team could answer. They needed more data. They needed confirmation. They needed to understand the mechanism. So they reprogrammed the drone. Instead of mapping the entire zone, it would focus on nodule fields. It would measure electrical activity across different areas. It would correlate voltage with oxygen concentrations in the surrounding water. The drone descended again. This time, it was specifically looking for electrical anomalies. It found them everywhere. Across hundreds of square kilometers, nodules were generating measurable electrical current. Not all of them. Some areas showed no activity. But in dense nodule fields, particularly where manganese concentrations were highest, the effect was consistent. Water samples taken directly above active nodule fields showed oxygen concentrations slightly higher than surrounding areas. Not dramatically higher, this was not a geyser of oxygen, but measurably elevated, statistically significant. The correlation was undeniable. Where nodules generated electrical current, oxygen levels were higher. The mechanism was still theoretical, but the evidence was mounting that something fundamental about deep ocean chemistry had been overlooked for decades. And then the AI found something else. On the 6th day of its second deployment, the drone flagged another anomaly. This time, not electrical, structural. The seafloor in one section of the survey area showed patterns, not random scattering of nodules. Patterns, geometric arrangements. At first, the research team thought it was pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns in random data, like seeing faces in clouds. The AI was probably just highlighting clusters that happened to look organized. But when they examined the high-resolution imaging, the patterns were undeniable. Spirals, grids, tessellated arrangements of nodules that looked almost deliberate. Some sections showed nodules aligned in parallel ridges. Others showed concentric circles. One area displayed what looked like hexagonal packing, the most efficient geometric arrangement for filling two-dimensional space. These were not small patterns. Some extended for hundreds of meters, and they appeared in multiple locations across the survey area. The research team's first instinct was a geological explanation. Currents, sediment settling patterns, some natural process that organized nodules over millions of years. Except the patterns changed. When the drone returned to the same areas days later, the arrangements had shifted. Slightly, subtly, but measurably different from previous imaging. Rocks do not move on their own, not on abyssal plains where currents are minimal and nothing disturbs the sediment for centuries at a time. But something was reorganizing these nodules. And the AI detected another correlation. The areas with geometric patterns also showed the highest electrical activity and the most significant oxygen production. That was when the research team started using a different word to describe what they were seeing. Not phenomenon, not anomaly. System. A self-organizing system powered by geochemical processes we do not understand, producing oxygen in an environment where it should not be possible, and potentially creating structures that serve some function we have not identified. The implications were staggering, and they extended far beyond the Clarion-Clipperton zone. If oxygen can be produced through geochemical processes in the deep ocean, that changes our models for how life evolved on Earth.
So, there you have it. And so this is why I've made this second video, because I've only found all this stuff about the what was going on with the magnetosphere in that region quite recently, and I already understood about the Clarion-Clipperton zone, because I had been. It was about it was a few months ago I found out what they were doing with this region. I was absolutely horrified. And so what I understood, you see, we all know that if you get a magnet, we've all done it as children, haven't we, where we have a magnet under a table and a piece of metal on top, and we move it about by moving the magnet about underneath the table. And so, and also at school with experiments with, say, iron filings, where if you put iron filings on a surface and you put a magnet underneath that surface, depending on the strength of the magnet, the iron filings will gradually move towards the magnet. And there's also the natural effect of geometric patterns that can be created according to the magnetic field, you see, directly under the ocean. So the seabed is like the table, and then the magma flow, which produces our magnetosphere that protects the entire planet from harmful solar energy, that is going to have an impact on these nodules that are iron rich, and are producing an electromagnetic field. Okay, and that then obviously is directly connected to the magma flow underneath. And all of this has been there for millions of years. And that's probably why, because I was wondering, how come all these nodules are just in that region, like, why are they there? And then they're actually moving. Well, they're not doing that on their own. So it must have something to do with what's going on in the Earth's mantle in terms of the movement of magma that's generating Earth's magnetic field, and that it has connected. There is a direct connection, a link between the ocean floor, what's on the ocean floor, and what's underneath. And so, in 2010, when they allowed industrial exploration of the area, which really was a disgusting thing that they even allowed it. But you know what big industry's like. They can twist arms, can't they? There's blackmail, bribery. I mean, you're talking about $1 trillion worth of resources here that you just simply have to pick them up from the seabed. And so, these industrial explorations, which they were claiming, yes, we're testing equipment and stuff like that, really damaged the entire area, left tracks that, are going to take perhaps centuries to recover. Damaged a third of the life there, killed it off. So there's a third left life there just from their explorations and testing their machinery. And of course they were extracting the nodules, and probably that's, they extracted it enough to pay for the exploration in the first place, because that's what big industries like, isn't it? These big corporations. So they'd obviously extracted a lot of the material down there in the process of their exploration. And then the explorations were ended. And that was between, like I say, from 2010 through 2011 and probably part of 2012. And that's where the damage was done, that suddenly that electromagnetic connection between the nodules on the seabed that were sustaining life in that region, directly because probably of the magnetosphere, and maybe that's what was sparking the electro field that was producing oxygen. And so you remove the nodules, weaken the entire area by 1/3, because if 1/3 of life has disappeared, then that's 1/3 of the energy that was producing the oxygen there has disappeared. Okay, so they must have took a hell of a lot of material, and then suddenly we find, oh, the magnetic field has completely altered in that region. That it has, that one chunk of it has decided, oh, I'm going to go another way now. And I believe that these two things are related. I think what's happening with those nodules and the way that they're moving and arranged into geometric shapes does actually prove that, yes, it does have a direct correlation with the magnetic field, the magnetic flow, and that when you've removed these, it was like a shock wave going through the entire magnetosphere, the entire magma system underneath, and it altered a huge chunk of it. Because, the magnetic field, it's a very fragile thing, I mean, it is quite a weak field. It's just enough for us to, on Earth to move a small metal thing in a compass, the pointer in a compass. That's it. But collectively, and the energy that it spreads outside of the planet, is enough to protect us from harmful solar rays and that come in from the solar winds that just moves across Earth. And that magnetosphere does also connect with the energy within the sun. You see, that they sort of, block each other. So all that energy just passes over Earth, because otherwise, we probably would be fried. That's how important the magnetosphere is. And so what happened in 2026 is that in 2026 they said that after they'd stopped these industrial explorations, they were over. They said that they'd start opening up, granting mining licenses from 2026 onwards, or around 2026. So, and then look what's happened in 2026. They've probably been given mining licenses from the 2020s on, and then suddenly, suddenly it's like reversing again. After recovering, now it's reversing again. And why? Why were they giving mining licenses? You see, and we've only just found out very recently, since this AI drone has been down to examine the ocean floor, that how the entire ecosystem down there works. And that the oxygen, it isn't just getting the minuscule amount of oxygen coming down from above. The whole area is being fed by oxygen being released from these nodules that I believe are directly connected to Earth's magnetosphere underneath the magma flow, that is influencing these rocks. And that's probably why they're all together, because on a global scale, these nodules are equivalent, really, to iron filings, aren't they? And the dynamics of a magnet underneath iron filings. Except in this case, they are magnetic iron filings, aren't they? Because it's locked on. It's like the two positive ends, is it, of the magnet that attract each other. And so when you move this stuff away, you've suddenly, I suppose it's like a catapult in a way, that suddenly this link's broken and it has impacted the magma. Now, the thing about this is that it's an area the size of Europe. We're talking about, that's how big it is. And we're talking about genocide of all the life in that region. Because, big industry, corporations, they want that material. I mean, they're planning World War III at the moment. Europe's going to, and Britain too, are devoted, and America, to just making bombs and drones and stuff like this. And for that, they need all this metal, they need it to make their new equipment. And at the moment, they're relying on children in Africa to mine stuff like coltan and cobalt and stuff like this. That is what is happening. So they're getting a trickle. And it's like, oh, look, it's all just lying there on the ocean floor. We can just go and grab it. It isn't just for car batteries. And that is the irony of it, isn't it? That we're being told that, we've got to ban fossil fuels because they're causing global warming and blah, blah, blah. Well, how much is the planet going to warm up with a very dramatically weakened magnetosphere? That we're going to stop using fossil fuels and rely on material that we basically had to commit a genocide of life on at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, a whole ecosystem, and we don't know then what that chunk of life being taken out of the ecosystem suddenly will then have on the rest of life within the Pacific Ocean, because we know it's all a food chain. Everything is relative. So, so we're talking about genocide of life in the Pacific Ocean, and in order to basically create a genocide for the whole of Europe to be, we're talking about World War III with Russia, against Russia, for no actual reason other than Russia was selling us cheap gas and America didn't like it. That's the fact of it. That's the basis fact of it. And, we are in the middle of witnessing a genocide on Earth, created by all these weapons, AI, all the new technology. This is the material that it needs to keep going. So, a genocide of the ocean in order to create a genocide on Earth, all under the direction of absolute maniacs who have no idea about anything. They would have been there in the 1980s, 1990s, mining this stuff straight away, if the UN hadn't been there with international law of the sea. No, this is a protected area, but push, and they get to do exploration, which they should never have been allowed to do because of the damages that we know. Look at what it's caused. A third of life lost in that region, life that had not even yet been identified. And the impact on Earth's magma flow in the outer core. I mean, it is incredible information. And actually, I was glad to find this information, because when I first discovered about the Clarion-Clipperton Zone and what they were doing, I was absolutely, I can't even find the words to describe, every bit as upset as the genocide that we've all been witnessing that's going on in Palestine right now. and Lebanon, and now Iran being hit. It's been really, really difficult. But and so, you know, what we're seeing against the life of our planet, it's typical, really, isn't it? It's typical of the psychopaths that are governing us. You know, like the kind of people who, you know, bring orangutans to the brink of extinction because they want to produce palm oil. Chop trees down and put palm oil producing trees in instead, because you can make money out of palm oil. Apparently, you know, orangutans are just worthless creatures, really, aren't they? Creations of our universe. The life at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, oh, forget about that. We need those nodules. It's worth $1 trillion. Well, how much is a living planet worth? Is it worth $1 trillion? It's priceless. You couldn't buy it with $1 trillion. $1 trillion couldn't create a planet. All $1 trillion can do, if it's just put in a few hands, is allow those people to, you know, carry on being utter maniacs and just damaging the whole of our planet, because they are literally like a bull in a china shop when it comes to life on Earth. They just take without thinking, because they don't know anything, because they don't learn first. They have no caution. They don't take everything into account. All they're interested in is, you know, oh, look, gold, quick, grab it. They're just eyes and belly, eyes and stomach. That's what they are. They're dangerous, dangerous people. And it is about time that we'd stood up and said no to the corporation. No, you're not having this stuff. Go away. We need to stand by international law and our human rights to protest, because they're trying to remove those rights to protest. At the moment, it's all about anti-Zionism and stuff, when, you know, just by standing up for your human rights, you're being anti-Zionist. But it will spread to everything. And I do not believe that I'm the only person that's made this connection. I believe that some scientists have made that connection, but nonetheless, they're keeping it quiet. I mean, this kind of stuff, these 2 videos, should have been shown on the BBC. It's the kind of thing that you'd see on, what was it, BBC's Horizon programme. But nothing. Because they don't want people to know, because, you know, these electric cars and the computers and everything in the new technology that they're using all relies on this kind of material. And so, yeah, it's important. And I made my video and I thought, well, you know, I could have just made a fool of myself by making this connection. But I wasn't bothered. I'm happy to make a fool of myself if it at least informs some people and raises awareness about what is going on, and that we do need to stop this. But now, even more. I mean, before I was just, you know, concerned about the life there. But then I found out about this impact on the magma movement below the ocean floor. And so now it's like, oh yeah, we found the exact reason why no more mining down there. Okay? Hands off. And we need to do that, because we are talking about the whole planet. And like I say, they want that material to make their bombs, to basically wipe out Europe. They do. We already know they're on a massive depopulation agenda. By the time they've done, the planet will only probably be able to sustain 500 million people anyway. And so it'll still be overpopulated. Because that's what these people thrive on, is austerity, you see. That is poverty, austerity. That's their dynamo for the whole society. Everybody chasing the dollar. right? But that's not how we are meant to live. Their money is a complete fiction. Pieces of paper, printed paper, or numbers on a computer screen. But the life of our planet is not numbers on a computer screen. It isn't printed paper. And so, yes, we do need to stand up. Because, you know, there is a direct correlation between what's going on our planet, on the surface of Earth, and what's going on below, this, you know, on the seabed. And the people that are prepared to damage an entire ecosystem, and the UN, was it International Seabed Authority? What were they doing, allowing these corporations to even explore there when they weren't exploring? They were mining. They were allegedly testing out their equipment, but they already had this equipment in order to go and explore the place in the first instance. Why were they allowed? And as I say, you know, there's nobody guarding anything. There's no oversight of anything, and we need to start this now. Everything needs to have oversight. I remember the CEO of some 5G firms standing up, you know, and telling at some lecture or whatever it was, and he stood there and he's literally telling the world that we are going to have 5G and we don't care what impacts are. We're not having any scientific studies or on impacts. It's just going to be rolled out. We're not having any legislations or studies about how it might impact that, when we know that it directly impacts insect life. We've lost 75% of our insects. It is crazy, crazy stuff. And we need to make a decision about which way we want to go forward. Do we want to, you know, I mean, they are literally fulfilling Revelations like a blooming blueprint. And, you know, Revelations itself, it's just a montage of the prophecies of the original Testament. That's all it is. It's been put together by somebody else and people believe it, you know, and they're saying it's God's will and totally ignoring it. And this is why they're ignorant, you see, because they just pick on information that they want. Yeah, everything's God's will. Well, it isn't, because God gave humanity free will. That's the fact of it. We have free will, and intelligence has to make right choices in order to progress. And the way that choices are right is because it aligns with universal law. It aligns with compassion and care for the life of our planet. Why else would a planet need intelligent life except to be a care and a mercy and a compassion for the life on Earth? So that if there's a major catastrophe, an event like a meteorite hit, we, the people, can save as much life as we can, like Noah did with his ark. And it turns out there were hundreds of Noah all over the planet during the time of the Great Flood. And that's why life did survive, and humanity as well. So the universe operates on a system of abundance, and that's how we should be living, on a system of abundance. The idea that there's too many people is absolute nonsense. There are not too many people, and they never will be, once we start living intelligently. Okay? They thrive on fear, greed, hatred, jealousy, crime. Okay? And the very fact that this elite, global corporate elite now, that are controlling everything that's going on our planet at the moment, that they're commonly called the Epstein class now. I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? Child abuse. That's why politicians are where they are, because they are child abusers and they're being blackmailed. They can be relied on to be yes men for the corporation. That's why how the corporation has become so powerful. There's been nobody there to stand up for we the people when you've got somebody there either threatening you and your family or has got some blackmail material on you or has set you up in order to provide blackmail material that they're going to make public if you don't do what they say. But then if you do what they say, here you go, look, there's $1 million there for you. They've bought politicians like pieces on a chessboard. And so, yeah, we do. We need to stand up because, I think we need to forget the fear, feel the fear and do it anyway. Because, yes, they are coming after all of us. Okay? We need to understand that. And the only way to combat that doom and gloom that they've been threatening us with for centuries is to face it and stand up for our own rights, for our planet's rights. Because that's how we get strong. We're using our muscles, we're using our rights. And I think after we've witnessed what they'll do even to babies and even sit on news programmes, I've seen them justifying the murder of babies, literally shredding children, and absolutely not an iota of compassion, just sat there, well, no, they're all terrorists. There are no innocent children or babies in Gaza. They're all terrorists. It is that consciousness that will destroy our planet. Because it's stupid, it's ignorant, it isn't connected to reality, to the reality of the human condition, which compassion is. It is a cornerstone of human intelligence. And the people without it are literally, they are intellectually disabled. They are intellectually blind because they're just so blinkered they can only see what they want. Eyes and belly, eyes and belly. And it's them who are afraid. It's them who are paranoid. And they project their paranoia and fear onto the population and use it to control us. Dividing us, categorising us. Oh, black people are inferior. Women are inferior. Children are inferior. I mean, still, our children judged to be minor human beings. That's the legality. We need to remove that judgment against our children as minor human beings. And, so it's easy for them to say, well, if they can do that to people, of course they'll do it to the life of our planet and say, well, what is it, this life on the bottom of the ocean, Pacific Ocean floor, it's not really doing anything for us. It's just there. What if it dies? So what? So what if that food chain is down there is actually is a fundamental feature, foundation of the rest of life in the Pacific Ocean? Because if this life has been there for millions of years, it could have been there for billions of years. These in the deep dark, when there were no sunlight getting through, on the surface even, but deep in the ocean. This has been going on for millions of years, this relationship between these nodules and the life that it supports. We just don't know. So there needs to be further study. And so that's why I've made this second video, because it does need, scientists now, science does need to get on board and to demand, to have a moratorium on this. And every scientist in the world, needs to participate in it. And I would like them to look into my theory about the connection and to study as to whether it was this that caused this chunk of magma to suddenly break off and reverse its direction. And now there's been more mining going on down there. There has to have been, because it had almost repaired itself. And then suddenly 24, 25, 26, suddenly, oh no, it's gone back again. Because I think that they've done even more mining down there. And I think we are at peril. You know, we are talking like a serious risk here. And don't forget, they're not just mining the Pacific, they are doing the same to the Atlantic. And there's been magnetic field anomalies in the Atlantic as well. So I think we can't ignore these connections. We can't just brush them aside as coincidence when there's so much at stake. So thank you very, very much for listening, for taking the time to listen. And please talk about this to other people, share the information, discuss it, do whatever you can to save our planet from these absolute monsters.